This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about him.
All right, episode 87. Let's do this. How's it going? Did your sample arrive yet? Did you forget to order a kit? Did you order the wrong kit? Well, it's okay if you did. You can download a new oil information slip off our website and send that along with your kit. What did the report say? Was it good news or bad news? Did you have high metals? You have contamination? Are you going to go fight the mechanic that did the rebuild? Well, you probably shouldn't, but if you are, let me know first. Just consult with your analyst before you make any life-changing maintenance decisions. All right, I just wanted to check in with everybody. My name is Joe, a.k.a. Blackstone Joe. For those that don't know, I am a senior analyst with Blackstone. Sometimes I forget when I started. It's been so long ago. I've been around, so I guess I marked time by sports. So I interviewed shortly after the Cubs won the World Series in 2016. So I rolled into the new year, 2017, with Blackstone. So that was year one. And it turns out oil analysis is a good time. And if you're good at it, you can be a senior analyst. So that's what I am. I found that no matter how well you write a comment, though, folks often still have questions or want to know more about the operation. So I started this podcast to help impart the good news of used oil analysis, but also give you a listen behind the curtain, so to speak, of how we do what we do. Return listeners, I hope you enjoyed episode 86 with Miranda, another senior analyst on our staff. I had so much fun on that one, getting to know more about Miranda, and if you did too, don't forget to leave a rating and a review. Your host, your producer would be much obliged. Speaking of great reviews, one of my favorite listeners we have, Crazy Dave, left a glowing review on Apple Podcasts. Be like Crazy Dave. Anyway, on to a voicemail from Crazy Dave.
Hey, my name is Crazy Dave, aka David Foster. Done a couple of oil samples with y'all and been really glad to see the results. Really glad with the customer service y'all offer. And been listening to the podcast. I've caught up to current. I started maybe like 3 months ago, and I've got my way up to current. It's a great podcast. Love it. Just want to ask a quick question. The Unit ID, I noticed one of them, I don't know if it was just too long, but anyway, it got changed to like just it's more generic what the car was ID. I thought I was being pretty clever and used better MPG than my LBZ in reference to my LBZ Duramax. The little 2017 Honda is my daily driver because diesel's insane and gas is better and double the mileage, the LBZ, of course. Anyway, I'm just curious why my name got changed on it, and thank you very much for your awesome podcast. Keep it up, the good work. Take care of yourselves, and y'all have a good one. Peace out.
Okay, so this question pertains to the unit ID. So Crazy Dave had a unit ID for his sample, a perfectly acceptable unit ID. And what had happened was we made a choice, a clerical choice, whoever was logging the sample in, to slightly amend his chosen unit ID. So the amendment in question, Crazy Dave, it looks like we did not put LBZ in your unit ID. And sometimes I think what happens is we'll remove what can, to our eyes, look like a bit of a redundancy. If, say, we know from the remaining details that it is a LBZ, then for brevity's sake, we might remove a detail like that. So it was a choice. However, we are certainly open to amending it and putting in your chosen unit ID and go from there. Unit IDs are up to you. The only time that I will usurp a customer's unit ID fully is if it's laced with profanity for no good reason. I don't know. Sometimes people just don't realize that this is like I think from our comments, some folks will assume that we are so laid back that you can just really let it all hang out when you're filling out your oil information slip. And some manners are certainly appreciated. I'm just going to put it that way. If you have profanity all over the slip and you just think it's funny, maybe to you. But I'm here doing a job, and so is everyone else. So at times, that will not be met with the most receptive audience. So if you're just getting to know us, maybe get started on the right foot and catch the vibe first before you start really letting it all hang out, so to speak. So in general, your unit ID, which for the uninitiated, that is how we refer to whatever it is you're sampling. We want to keep that unit ID consistent on each slip going forward. If there has been a change to your chosen unit ID, it may be a choice, like I just discussed. Maybe it's a situation where you were a little bold with your turn of phrase, or maybe it's something where we see what looks to be a redundancy as far as the information provided, and we might make a choice there. But if you ever see a unit ID that is not what you want it to be, you can be like Crazy Dave and just holler at us. Let us know that you want it to be changed, or if you just have a question about why we made the change, either way, it's fine to simply drop us a line and let us know what you'd like to be changed as far as the clerical details surrounding how we log your sample in our system. Anyhow, the other night, I'm in my house, specifically the kitchen. So I do all the cooking and grocery shopping, and well, that's because I like doing it. And I would prefer dinner to be something that I decided and I made, and I put a lot of time and effort into getting better, more capable in the kitchen. So that's just a little about me. And you know, when I go into the grocery, it's like a search and rescue mission. The search being for the ingredients, and the rescue being the removal of my debit card before I do too much damage. So anyhow, back to the kitchen. It's busy days around my house. So my wife is in esthetician school, and I'm hardly home because I like to fill my time away from the office in performance venues of various sorts, lately theater. So making dinner has been trickier. Like, time is precious. I end up throwing together what I can as quick as I can, and sometimes I need to put recipes aside and simply look at what I have on the shelf and what can I make do with in a quick amount of time, snap decision. So I'm looking at the fridge, and I know I have a package of chicken, which is kind of a humble brag, I realize, since a package of chicken thighs in the fridge is practically a statement that you're middle class, or at least upper middle class these days, given the price of poultry. But I digress. So I have chicken. Check mark. I go into the crisper and see a poblano, jalapeno. I have a bottle of Italian salad dressing I haven't opened yet. I got like half a jar of mayo. I need something to eat tonight and something for the wife to take to lunch tomorrow. So what do? I throw the chicken in a freezer bag with salad dressing for a marinade. While that's hanging out, I go fire up the grill. I sear the poblano till it's blackened. Then I remove it, cover it with foil, let it steam. Then I add the chicken to the grill, and then once cooked, I save some for dinner before chopping up the rest. Then to a bowl, I add mayonnaise, chopped poblano, jalapeno, pickle, red onion. I had some fresh dill hanging around, and then the juice of a lemon. Fun fact, that all adds up to the best chicken salad in the world, and you can fight me if you disagree. Now, why the diatribe about cooking when I'm doing a podcast about used oil analysis, you may ask? Well, just as a cook in the kitchen is tasked with making use of what they have, so too are many owners we know who in the process of regular maintenance run into issues where they have to make use of what they have, but don't want to hurt the engine they're taking care of. Here's a few questions that fit into this category of how to make do. Number 1, I don't have enough of one oil to complete a change. Can you combine more than one brand or blends? For engine oils, I have good news. That's not a concern. Look, if you're a Ford owner and you have 4 quarts of Motorcraft and need another quart, you end up going to the ends of the earth to find that last quart of Motorcraft to complete the change. Ford will love you for it, but you don't have to. If you need to add in a quart of Mobil 1, for example, that's fine to do. You can really put brand and blend aside if you need to combine a couple of oils or even more to complete a change. That's fine to do when it is engine oil. Almost always, I don't have any sort of reason to advise against doing so. Remember that when it's API certified product, you can rest assured that if the oil meets the owner's manual specs, then you're not going to do wrong by combining a couple 030s. And honestly, if you are in a situation where, say, it's 10W40 primarily, you need to toss in some 040 or some 540. When the oil is at operating temp, a 540, a 040, etc., they're virtually indistinguishable. And if you need to combine, make a little petroleum-based cocktail, that is okay. You don't need to worry about it when it's engine oil. But this doesn't go across the board. I want to talk about transmissions here because these systems are far more intricate often, and what can happen is if you put the wrong oil, especially in, say, a CVT transmission and other transmissions too, but especially CVTs, what can happen is a failure rather suddenly, and if it's not sudden, there can still be damage by using the wrong fluid. So if you're in a situation with a transmission especially, be very wary of putting in the wrong oil. You do not want to be in a situation where, say, for example, you put in like a universal CVT fluid in a CVT transmission because you thought it would be fine, especially if we're talking about Nissan, where those have very specific oils that are called for, NS2, NS3, namely. We know how some of these fluids are supposed to look. But of course, there can be instances, new models, product types. So if you're in a situation where you want to look at the fluid that's in your transmission, you want to see if it meets the spec, do call or email first and just ask if we have a reference point for that fluid. If we don't, then you might want to send in an unused sample for comparison. But I do all this to say, if you're in a pinch and you're doing an oil change, first, think about what it is. If it's an engine and you're combining, say, a couple different brands, you're combining some slightly varied viscosities, generally that's okay. I don't have a reason to think that simply combining products that have slightly different additive packages, that's really not going to cause trouble. But pay attention to what it is, because if it's a transmission, especially something like a CVT, be wary of using the wrong oil. Absolutely go as far as you need to make sure that you're putting the right product in. But when you're making do, you can typically combine different oils. And as always, do consult with us if you have any questions before you're sending in a sample. If you're in a situation where you're wondering if you might have done the wrong thing, if it's the wrong fluid in there, drop us a line and then we'll go about how to proceed with your oil analysis. Question number 2. I don't have a new filter at the moment. Can I leave the used one in place when changing my oil? By and large, it's pretty rare for me to see a sample of used engine oil where the oil filter has really been used up. It's pretty rare. But if you want to go to the data and know for sure if the oil filter you have is still doing its job, you can send in a sample without draining all the oil via taking a sample from the dipstick tube. Some people will actually start the drain, take a sample, and then put the drain plug back in. That's a messy proposition. Some people do. More power to you if that's what you're going to do. But if you want to know how effective that oil filter is, all you need to do is request a standard analysis, because we can then look at insolubles, and insolubles are solids that form as the oil is exposed to heat, use, and blow-by. If insolubles are low, then you can keep that filter in place. And it's pretty rare to see a sample where the oil filter is used up. And when it is, it's often corresponding with other issues like The engine is clearly wearing heavily, probably due to excess heat being a factor, the oil oxidizing too quickly for the filter to keep up with, or there will be contamination like coolant. If all is well mechanically, generally that oil filter is not going to be used up from what I've seen. But it also wouldn't be wise of this analyst to suggest avoiding the data, therefore taking a sample and looking to see how those solids are, if they are being held in check. Then keeping that filter in place would be fine to do. So this is something where you want to go to the data before making any sort of assumption. I would just let folks know that should you be thinking about running your filters for more than one oil change, it's not something that wouldn't be an unreasonable proposition in many cases. So if you want to know how that filter's holding up, if you would like to run your filters longer than you currently are, just send in a sample. And if your objective is really keying on those insolubles, let us know on the oil information slip, and we'll look and see where those insolubles are at. While I talk about oil filtration, some people want to request a particle count to go along with insolubles and gauging how their oil filtration setup is working. And look, that's okay. You can certainly request it. But one thing I want to caution people about is often even oil that's still in pretty good shape, due to how much cleaning and lubricating it does, the oil is often too dirty for us to obtain a particle count. And that's okay. It doesn't mean your oil filtration is bad. It doesn't mean your engine is in bad shape. It's just that the job of cleaning and lubricating an engine often coincides with the oil reaching that level of dirtiness, and normally so. I would advise primarily leaning on insolubles to gauge how oil filtration is doing. If you want that particle count as an added data point, you can certainly send it along. And we can obtain particle counts on some engine oils. It's not like it's impossible. I would just say more often than not, the oil can be dirty just by doing its job, and that's really okay. And side note, I think some people really do look at a dirty oil as a bad sign, often more than they need to. It would be weird if the oil wasn't dirty. I mean, first of all, it's going to mix with residual oil from the past change. Second of all, it should be picking up combustion byproducts and getting dirty just from going about its business. And you want to go beyond the eye test when you're gauging how that oil looks really in any situation. Unless an oil looks so outrageously milkshake-like in appearance, you'd be surprised how astray the eye test can lead you. Even in my own cases, I had a sample of oil from my Chevy, and it looked very thin. I was like, this has to have a lot of fuel in it. It didn't look nearly viscous enough. And that just goes to show how you need to actually measure that viscosity at operating temp, because once we did, the viscosity was well within range. It's just to the naked eye, it seemed pretty thin. But back to the initial question. If you don't have a new filter, if you want to know if you can leave your filter in place, or you do have a filter and you're just experimenting, you want to see how effective your oil filtration setup has been and if that filter can remain in place, just send in a sample and we'll take it from there. Now, to be a little more specific, a lot of aircraft owners we know went from using Exxon Elite 20W50 to no longer being able to find said oil, as it was discontinued by ExxonMobil back in February of 2019 or thereabouts. There is, of course, XC 2050, but if you want to have the phosphorus additive that is in Exxon Elite, or was in, RIP Exxon Elite, if you want to have the phosphorus additive, if that's important to you, and it truly does matter in some cases, then W100 Plus, Phillips 66 Victory AW, or Aeroshell 1550, all of those have the phosphorus additive in them. So if you're trying to make do and you no longer can find that Exxon Elite 2050, then those are a few oils that have that phosphorus additive, and they're also good products in their own right. Sometimes making the call depends on the engine, though. This is not a one-size-fits-all case. For example, if you have a Lycoming 0320 H2AD, specifically that H2AD. They specifically call for an oil with at least 800 parts per million of phosphorus. Therefore, you do not want to be caught running XC 2050, for example, or a regular W100, because it won't have that phosphorus additive. Now, if you are married to one oil and you simply don't care, and you want to be one of those owners who's smarter than Lycoming, well, you make the call. But Lycoming calls for an oil with at least 800 parts per million of phosphorus, so that is what we're going to look for as well in our samples. So if we don't see it, we'll make note of that in the report. Also important with aircraft, I want to talk about non-AD oil. So unlike gas diesel engines, where I talked earlier about how it's fine to make a petroleum-based cocktail in most instances, when it comes to aircraft engine oil, you want to be sure that the oil you're using is ashless dispersant. If you use non-AD oil, if you're dumping in, let's say, automotive oil, well, that can result in detonation, something you don't want to imagine while you're up in the air. So use ashless dispersant oil. Don't be throwing in some gas diesel engine oil just because you figure, it's fine. It will not do its job and can result in detonation down the line. So be sure that you're running ashless dispersant. Don't be mixing up a petroleum-based cocktail, including whatever gas diesel engine oil you had on the shelf. Be wary of that when you're taking care of your aircraft. Well, that brings this episode to a close. Sometimes conditions aren't ideal, but to quote James Dean in East of Eden, it's going to work because it's got to work. And it's got to work because I said so. Thanks for listening. This is Blackstone Joe, signing off.